Hello, everyone, and so glad to see all of you here. And so, one thing that I actually promised a lot of you is the fact that I was going to be answering a significant amount of questions about what it was like to live in Myanmar, Burma, for about 3 weeks as a tourist with other English speaking members of my family. And as a result, I've encountered a number of questions, and I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of them completely well. But on the other hand, I will provide opinions as honestly as I can about as many of these topics as I can during the time that I have. Okay, so William Levin offers the following question. He says, did you wear short sleeves to show off your pythons? It's very interesting that you actually bring that up because one thing that's actually a significant problem in that area of the world is mosquitoes. And very interestingly, if you've actually noticed when I'm in all of the photographs, which I haven't posted them on Facebook yet, I'm actually wearing long sleeve shirts in all of them. And so this is actually to reduce the risk of me perhaps maybe getting any diseases. Despite that, there were medicines that were taken, etc., to actually reduce the risk of these diseases just in case. And also, very interestingly, a lot of these medicines did result in having extremely vivid, if not, in fact, bordering on deranged dreams. Okay, so the rest of the questions came from the fantastic Polyglot Polls group, which I'm very, very grateful for. Okay, so should I buy a longi when in Myanmar? Is it important to dress conservatively when visiting monasteries and temples? And so the answer to the second one is, of course, yes. And also another thing to be aware of is the fact that there will be some areas that are actually designated for men only. These areas are usually primarily elevated platforms in many regards. And as to buying a longi, yes, foreigners can definitely manage them and they can also wear them as well. And apparently a lot of local places will also teach you how to put them on in addition to that, and they will really help you with that. And so that's something you can definitely participate of, and a lot of people will actually be helpful in ensuring that you can pick ones that you really, really like. So those of you who are unaware, the longi apparently was termed by an Anglophone friend of mine as a man skirt, very interestingly. It's not exactly the same variety of thing. It's actually a bit like a kilt that's worn as a lower garment in many regards. It's very, very distinctive to Burmese culture specifically. Okay, the next question is, what are some cultural faux pas to avoid? This is a fantastic question. One thing you should definitely not do is touch anybody on the head. This is something that's not recommended in the slightest. Another thing is also indicating something with your foot, which is, for example, oh, that mirror over there, like kick your foot slightly in that direction. That's not something you want to do. And certainly if you do this to the Buddha, this is an extremely bad idea, so do not consider that in the slightest. And of course, another thing: tattoos, clothing of the Buddha, absolutely not under any circumstances. And what was the food like? This is very interesting because I remember a lot of the food actually was came into three distinct categories because, very interestingly, my father does not really like fish very much. And one reason for this is the fact that he was probably force-fed a significant amount of fish during his Hungarian Jewish childhood, and one result of this is that he apparently abstained from it during the greater portion of his adult life. As a result, I never really liked a lot of it anyway, and so mohinga, etc., that variety of fun stuff is not something that I've ever tried. Not also to mention the significant aspects of kashrut as well. Concerning some areas, there are obviously Western-style foods that are put together. Very interestingly, a lot of the tomato sauce is identical when used on pasta and pizza. A lot of these Western-style recipes are significantly bare bones, possibly influenced maybe by America and by other Western European nations. It's a little bit difficult to say. Also, however, it does not taste processed in the slightest. It tastes extremely fulfilling from a human standpoint, and it actually really, really felt good to taste in terms of its ingredients, but not in terms of its taste. And actually, having been to over 20 countries, and the only country that I actually have not tasted any local food from, but I have been there, was Jordan, because I was there during Chol HaMoed Pesach, which was the intermediate period on Passover, and so as a result, eating things there were out of the question, and apparently I brought food from across Israel during the entire time. Concerning other things, then there's the Indian food that's present there. A lot of that is significantly spicier than what I've encountered in New York City. Also, what's more is that a lot of it does tend to be significantly lighter as well, and of course it goes without saying that the portions are significantly smaller. Concerning the potato chips, yes, actually, they're surprisingly fulfilling. Also, very plain in their ingredients. What is your general view on the indigenous minorities of Myanmar? Now, granted, I haven't had a lot of contact with them, but very interestingly, it is clear, especially from the area near Inle Lake, that there are a lot of very distinct cultures and that they actually identify proudly, certainly in some public spheres in some regards, and certainly to tourists in many regards. Now, granted, I know that well beyond the surface, there are probably a significant amount of complications in a lot of these, and I've heard people from both outside and inside a lot of Southeast Asian countries refer to them very endlessly as tangles, ones that are Daedalian mazes in which you just simply cannot get out, nor can you possibly understand, even as an insider. However, very interestingly, one thing that also came to mind was the fact that in the big mall in Yangon, which was very much founded by Chinese investors, and very disturbingly, there was an entire bottom level right beneath this that was pretty much slums. And so just imagine among the worst slums imaginable on the bottom story, and then the top story, high security mall, probably significantly more extravagant than anything you could find in Times Square. And so very interestingly, they actually had little exhibitions in which various forms of traditional life of various ethnic groups from throughout Myanmar were actually captured in photographs. I think to some degree this does represent a variety of fear that as a result of the country opening up to investors in some regards, that a lot of these traditional cultures may end up being lost. And so to some degree the talk of becoming another Thailand was significantly popular when I was there. However, right now it could go in any direction. I really don't know what's going to happen, but right now suffice to say that I am moderately worried about a number of things. Okay, so other things. What's the number one place you would recommend to others to visit on the first trip of Myanmar? Okay, so I was in 4 different places when I was there. One was Mandalay, which does have a significant amount of monasteries and holy places nearby to Theravada Buddhism. And then there is Bagan, which has huge temples. Apparently, I've actually heard that the military, like during the sanctions years, I believe in the 1980s, at one point, they had actually tampered with a significant amount of the temples and thereby permanently disqualifying them from becoming a UNESCO heritage site. Then, of course, Inle Lake, which is pristine, among the best water that I've ever seen in my life, and very interestingly, it's like Southeast Asian Venice in many regards, and a lot of the houses are on stilts, and a lot of people really living truly traditional lives, not also to mention fishermen that apparently spend their entire time, it's like they put one foot in their boat, and the other foot, very interestingly, functions a little bit as an oar, like you attach an oar to the foot, and then you apparently use it to steer. And very interestingly, and then Yangon, which is a city with terrible traffic, but aside from that, significantly enchanting, with the Shwedagon Paya, the Shwedagon Pagoda probably being one of the most recognizable buildings of the Asian continent. And apparently I would probably list that as number 1. And then the second place that I would definitely mention is just Inle Lake in general. Be careful concerning hotels in Inle Lake because some of them apparently dump sewage directly into the lake, which actually does result in endangering those fishermen that I mentioned the other minutes ago. And so be aware of this. Spending appropriately in this country is of significant importance because very interestingly, the Burma campaign, which apparently did actively lead a travel boycott, I believe in the early 2000s, has very interestingly said that, even right now, travel is okay to the country as long as you spend very, very carefully. And make sure to patronize local businesses accordingly and ensure that you don't spend all of your money in one place and as a result further an already tear-inducing income inequality. Okay, and so here's another thing. Your favorite place I visited during my stay. So particularly, I'm just trying to put it into words. So I would list a number of three different particular places that would get the number one spot. One of them is the open expanse in Inle Lake, in which you actually see water that functions almost perfectly like a mirror. That's number one. The second one is, of course, the Swedagon Pagoda, which is very huge in Yangon. It is, I believe, the largest gold sculpture structure in the world. And the third one is the Matsmiach Yeshua Synagogue in Yangon, which is Myanmar's only synagogue, very interestingly. Obviously, as I come from a Jewish heritage, that's not going to be exactly the variety of thing that will be interesting to everyone. And very interestingly, I heard that both the Burmese and the Nepalese claim that they were the first country to actually recognize, within Asia, the first country to recognize Israel as a sovereign state. I know that David Ben-Gurion actually visited Myanmar before the military juntas took over in the 1960s. What's more, another thing is they actually donned the national costume and apparently also went on Buddhist retreats. The local Jewish community in then Burma actually deemed this as a variety of betrayal. Because they saw this as him surrendering his Jewish identity for the sake of politics. And so that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. Okay, so other things. Is it legal to buy pet Burmese pythons there? I honestly have not tried. The Myanmar people really use the word Mingalaba amongst themselves, and then apparently the short answer, no. The answer is that they, as a foreigner, and this will touch into another question shortly, yes, they did use that term with me. Obviously the fact is I knew some Burmese at the juncture, obviously the people with whom I was traveling with did not, but apparently they got addressed with Mingalaba very, very frequently as well. Concerning with Burmese to other Burmese speakers, one would primarily use a number of situational greetings, like equivalent of, are you well or have you eaten yet? That's significantly more common. Okay, and so then this will probably be the last question for now, and then there's another question that's probably going to go entirely in a new video. This is, did people treat me differently because I was a foreigner? This is very interestingly. Surprisingly, when people hear me speak some Burmese at various events in New York City, they actually assume that I'm a heritage speaker. And very interesting, they say that I'm most likely somebody who is Burmese, and they actually ask me that if I am. The answer is no, I am not. Apparently, I remember somebody asked me about 2 years ago to name the place on Earth I knew about the least, and apparently I pointed to Myanmar and Burma as the place that I actually knew least about on Earth, and that lasted about a few months. And so concerning people treating me very, very differently. Two respects. One fact is that if you look like this, or if you look visibly non-Southeast Asian, there will be a lot of people, particularly young people, usually kids or groups of young women, who will want to take group photographs with you. And so to some degree, this is something you just simply really need to suck up. Apparently, if you speak Burmese back at them, they'll apparently applaud you. Very interesting regards, really. And apparently, if you speak something well beyond a few sentences, you're going to get wows, fantastic. And sometimes like people literally laughing at you because they almost can't believe that someone like you would know anything of their language at all. Aside from that, there's also another reality in which it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to be answered in the local language, because they may see you as practice for English, German, or various other languages. And so one result of this is the fact that often a lot of people, I believe about 5% of Burma, Myanmar's population has ability to have a conversation in English. Good, fluent conversation. A lot of them can use the basics significantly, but often they leave out pronouns entirely. And for those of you who have studied Burmese or some other Asian languages that work like that, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. But very interestingly, aside from that, harder for me to really get answered in the local language, significantly given red carpet treatment at some points, and of course a lot of people really wanting to take my picture just by virtue of being foreign. And apparently if I was wearing the lonji or the tanaka, the beige wood paint, apparently it's actually classified as a different color in the Burmese language, then that would actually prompt even more fascination. And a lot of them are not afraid to show fascination in the slightest. Okay, so, and then one last one, I think, the Kayan women have elongated giraffe necks. There was a place in Inle Lake that was actually ran by Kayan women weavers, and yes, I did actually see them there. Not only that, apparently they did have the variety of pipes that apparently cause the type of long necks, and apparently they actually weighed about as much as my computer. And this is my computer. Okay, with the list of questions accordingly. And I think that that's pretty much the set of questions that I feel that I'm fairly qualified to answer. I know that there are some questions about politics that a lot of you asked me. I'm afraid that I'm not very qualified to really talk about them in depth, but aside from that, I think that I'm very, very grateful for the fact that I have curious people like you. And again, shout out to the online polyglot groups who contributed a lot of these questions, and thanks for ensuring that I have inspiration every single day because of everything that you do. I really mean this. And for those of you who celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah to you, and I will see you in another video. Farewell.